Today, I got to talk to my old friend, Logan. I got to pick his brain on how best to manage offshore teams, which he has a lot of experience in. And we also talk about the importance of checklists and probably the one most simple test that tells you when it's time to scale your product. He currently works at Symbiosis, a next-generation retail media platform. I didn't know what that was. Now I do. Pretty cool stuff. This is episode 8 of How Not to Build. Dude, thank you. Thanks for being here.
Yeah.
Thanks for flying all the way down from Seattle just to do this pod with me.
For sure. Thanks for having me. Thanks for driving all the way from Dallas.
Yeah. I don't know why we met in Austin.
Yeah.
Convenient for both
No
of us.
particular reason.
Yeah. What are you glad about today, Logan?
What am I glad about? That's a fun way to start. I mean, yeah, I guess just being here, reconnecting with an old friend. I'm glad we got some time outside. It's always nice. Excited to see my sister today. That's also why I'm in Austin.
Oh, it's not for me?
That whole other thing, yeah.
Oh, now I don't want to be here. It's good, man. Is there anything that you are anxious about?
Yeah, I'm anxious about a lot of things. I mean, right now I'm anxious about the Slack messages unanswered, the emails unanswered, unread even, getting more right now. Alerts going off.
What did you do? It's not like you broke production or anything.
I did break production today, actually. Earlier today. Yep. Actually, I'm going to take this off because I don't even want.
Good call.
Yeah, I did. I broke production earlier today. I released a change that, it broke the deployment to production. I actually, fortunately, did not break production.
Okay.
It very easily could have, but I got lucky this time.
Yeah, it happens. What are you hopeful about?
I mean, personally, right now, I guess I'm hopeful about, I'm reading this book right now. I'll have to pull it out so I can get the name later. But the first thing it talks about is sort of accepting that you're never going to get on top of it. You're never going to feel like you're done or on top of your to-do list, your never-ending to-do list. But I am starting to feel like I am getting to the point of acceptance of not necessarily on top of everything all the time, because that's impossible, but at least confident that I am where I'm supposed to be. I've done what I'm supposed to have done. And while there's a mountain of things always waiting for me to do, I can at least enjoy the moment that I'm in. And I am hopeful that I can continue to work on that skill, because that is something that has kept me from, I think, enjoying a lot of life previously. And the more I can do that, the more I can enjoy the moment.
Do you have something very specific and tactical that you've learned from the book that you could share as to how you're finding that?
I've only read the first chapter so far.
Okay, but you're hopeful.
Yeah, I mean, the first chapter does have it's written in a way where it specifically gives a specific, I guess, piece of action for each chapter, and each chapter is meant to be read in one day. The first chapter was just accepting that it's impossible to get on top of everything. So that is basically the tip or the insight, at least for that. I'm looking forward to more, but yeah, that's the first bit of practice to put into practice, is just accepting that it's impossible to get on top of everything.
That's good. That's good. So tell us, who do you work for? What do you do for them?
Yeah, so I work for Symbiosis. It's the name of the company. It's an ad tech company, and I'm a staff software engineer. I work on back-end stuff. I work on data stuff. I've kind of been doing data pipelines for most of my career, if you look at it a certain way, from airplane data pipelines all the way down to now marketing and ad tech, that sort of thing.
Okay, and one of the reasons I wanted to have you on is because you've had kind of a long history of working with offshore teams and kind of seeing maybe the good, the bad, and the ugly a little bit. What are the strengths and weaknesses of offshore teams?
So I'd say, the main strengths are it's sort of the on-demand nature of them, the scalability in both directions, both up and down. So you're able to quickly sort of add 3 or 4 heads potentially to your team. If you're really successful, your product's really successful and it's taken off, you're able to pull back 3 or 4 heads really quickly if, the budget's tightened up and you need to tighten the belt. So that's probably the biggest strength. I would say the weaknesses come in 2 flavors. The first being that you're essentially, outsourcing a big part of your kind of technical and domain knowledge to another team. So this whole part of your project or product, not only are you kind of having someone else do the work, but they're also getting the learnings for that. And so you don't get to kind of benefit from those learnings as much unless you're careful. And there's ways you can kind of compensate for that, but that would be kind of one risk, I'd say.
Yeah.
And then second is just, inherently you're adding a new layer of communication, you're adding a new layer of overhead. The fact that they aren't part of your team and part of your company means that You're going to have to be communicating with them. You're going to have to be coordinating with them. If they are truly offshore, you probably have a time zone delay difference that you have to deal with. Maybe they're on the other side of the world potentially. So they're working at night while you're working during the day. You have to have handoff points. It just adds like a lot of overhead. And then there's the constant game of telephone, trying to make sure that they understand your needs and your requirements, and that you're understanding the technical issues that they're running into.
Is there a better and worse context to be working with offshore teams? Because I know you and I worked at large airplane companies, enterprises. On the other end of the spectrum, you've got, well, how big is Symbiosis?
At the moment, we're somewhere around 25 to 30.
Small company.
Still pretty small.
So Symbiosis, 25 roughly employee company. Are you guys using offshore there?
Yeah.
How has that, have you seen, like I said, a unique benefit to a small or large company taking that approach? Or is it kind of the same across the board?
My experience has mostly been with smaller companies taking that approach. And I mean, I would say the benefit is still largely the same in either case, though. I mean, I can't think of a particular reason. The other advantage you have with larger companies is a lot of times there's extra red tape, bureaucratic red tape that you have to go through at a larger company that if you're able to just contract a team, you could potentially avoid a lot of that over having to use an internal team to do the same thing.
Gotcha. Yeah, and you mentioned one of the weaknesses of having that offshore team is like they're having all the learnings, they're having all the knowledge, all the IP, right? How do you said there are ways to compensate for that. Yeah. How do you compensate for that?
I mean, I think the way that you compensate for both of the risks or issues with an offshore team is the same. I mean, it's kind of a tough pill to swallow. It's like not the answer people want to hear because it's the hard thing, but like you just have to make sure you spend enough time with them. That's basically it. The most successful offshore teams I've had have been teams that either I or another person has spent a significant amount of time nurturing that relationship and making sure that they understand exactly what you need and that they're sharing the learnings back and that they're sharing any issues that they have back with you. And by taking sort of the reins, if you will, of the development, you're, right there in the trenches with them, learning what they're learning, getting the feedback day to day, answering the questions, making the decisions. You're actually getting that learning at the same time versus kind of throwing something over the fence. They give you back something, you have no idea what they went through to kind of get you the end result.
And you say spend significant time with them. Is that 1 hour a day? Is that 8 hours a day?
I think it depends. It depends on what you're building. It depends on the team. It depends on how experienced they are. And these are things to think about as you're hiring the team. But in my experience, the investment would be upfront, and it could be up to a couple hours a day, a couple, 2-3 times a week, I would say, maybe more even, sitting with them and, even to the level of like paired programming, walking them through your code stack or reviewing what they're doing. And, something else I've seen work, I didn't do this personally, but, flying out to them for a week or 2 weeks to get them up to speed, and you spend literally the whole day with them for a couple weeks, and, your only time away is handling the home front over email and whatnot, and otherwise you're dedicated to them. That upfront investment, I think, pays dividends down the line, and eventually you're able to back off and have it be an hour a week, 2 hours a week, something like that, and you can sort of have it on autopilot. But you need to invest in the team, and or even if you have like a good lead on that team. That's kind of the way it worked in my last role. I trained the lead really, really well, and he was able to pass that knowledge on
the offshore side.
Correct.
And it seems like also, so like you've been the technical person on the company side that's been managing that. So you were playing this role between the business side. You were like an on-staff technical person overseeing these teams and working with them. So it's kind of another layer. It wasn't straight like founder to offshore team in some of these cases. It was
correct.
Founder had technical people on staff that were going between and managing all.
Yeah, and the previous team, it was interesting because I did sort of cradle to grave the entire offshore team, like finding the contacts, getting the proposal, working through the contract, negotiating the rate, onboarding the team, deciding statement of work, scope of work, training, and then implementation and on into like maintenance role, basically.
After doing all that, do you have any glaring pro tips on that whole process? Like where things can go wrong, and how do you find the team? How do you bring them on board?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if I'd even say they're pro tips. I mean, leverage your network to find the team. That's That's what worked out well for me. If you can find someone who comes with an endorsement, it's obviously gonna kind of give you a leg up just in your confidence that they can handle what you're gonna throw at them. But be careful, because a lot of times these teams come at you from like headhunters or something like that, and they're getting a cut. So that's a double-edged sword a little bit. Got to make sure that you're not just kind of getting a recommendation because that person's going to get a percentage of what you're paying. But in general, if you know people that know people, that's the best way to kind of get started. And then I don't know, the only real pro tip I had just goes back to what I've already said, which is you just really have to, once you get going, you have to really kind of nurture the team and treat them as if they're your intern or junior developer in the beginning, and really like their success is your success, and really be ready to invest the time.
Yeah. Cool. You never got the opportunity to go meet them on site though?
No, I never went down there, yeah.
Okay. Why not, man? Free excuse to travel.
I know, right?
And you've had people in India, South America,
and Ukraine, actually.
And Ukraine, that's right.
Poland after.
Okay.
But specifically, I managed my interaction with the team in India, with the team in Ukraine was a little bit higher, but those were, I was sort of a secondary support role at best. But the team in Mexico was the one that I actually brought on.
Okay. And by the way, speaking of referrals, I mean, you were one of the people I reached out to as far as, hey, I might need an offshore team.
Yeah.
You have somebody you'd recommend, and your recommendation is like, I don't even look at their website. I'm like, if Logan, somebody I trust, is saying that they're trustworthy, then I'm just going to, trust them by default. Very cool. And going back to your role at Symbiosis, you said you're a staff engineer working with the data. What's the biggest mistake? Because I know you're also leading and managing teams. It's a team?
Currently, just an individual contributor.
Currently an individual, okay. Yeah. But you've managed teams before.
Yeah.
At large aerospace companies out of the Northwest, which won't be named.
Yeah.
What's the biggest mistake you've made as a leader?
It's a good question. I think in general, it's just not investing enough in the individual team members is probably the biggest thing, and on the flip side, like the biggest learning.
Do you have a specific story about that happening and the fallout?
Not in particular. I mean, a couple companies ago, I was working for this company that did telematics for trucking companies and school bus companies. And, I think the mistake there was I got kind of wrapped up in the management ethos and sort of the more managerial side of management. So status updates, dashboards, green, yellow, red, and reporting out to leadership, senior leadership, that sort of thing week after week. And sort of that being more the focus of my time rather than just sort of feeding it back in the other direction and making sure that the team was doing well. It's not like a specific story, but I will say like what kind of the fallout of that approach was just sort of a lack of direction for the team and a lack of, we just didn't really galvanize on anything, because if you kind of let upper management pull you around too much, it can be hard to stay grounded.
Were you able to figure that out during your time there? Were you able to resolve that issue?
To a certain extent, but some things are inherent in the management culture, I guess, and there's only so much you can do. Okay,
yeah. It is hard. I mean, it's like you said, there's a certain culture, especially when I don't know if this was like your first time in management or not.
That was actually.
It was, okay.
Officially, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because I feel like that's especially hard when you've got somebody who it's kind of their first time. They're looking to the culture to help guide them.
Yeah.
And then it sort of takes a while sometimes to be like, okay, I'm going through the motions. But like as hindsight builds up, I'm seeing that this is not actually leading to the culture that should be happening. We're not galvanized. We don't have a shared vision. It sounds like.
Yeah.
People are just spinning their wheels.
Yeah. It's a delicate balance, because I think direction should come from the top. Leadership should know where they're going, but at the same time, they rely on the individual contributors to sort of inform them of the day-to-day realities. Once your company reaches a certain size, and you're a VP or a CTO, you can't know everything that's going on the ground. And so the team itself has to define their own statement of work and direction to a certain extent without necessarily kind of constantly getting feedback from management on it.
Do you have any good tips on that? Like, how does a team find that direction, or how do they work it up the chain in a way that's relatable? Yeah.
I think it just comes with experience.
Yeah.
You kind of have to put the time in to learn what works and what doesn't work. And as a team, you have to sit together and just really have the hard conversations, working out any technical differences between team members in terms of the direction you're going, and really like honing in on, okay, this is what we need to do this month. So, you're going to do this piece, you're going to do that piece, and it's all going to kind of cohesively combine to a common direction.
Yeah, kind of going back to what you were saying about time, like spending the time necessary to think through the problem, get alignment from the team members, solicit the feedback. It's time.
But a lot of it too is just, we talked about earlier, which is just kind of having empathy and listening. So a lot of times in a team setting, discussions can kind of devolve into chaos. I'm sure we've all been there. And a lot of time, spending the individual time with each person allows you to sort of hear them out to the extent where it's not necessary to bring up contradictions in a team setting where it's going to devolve into chaos. And instead you're able to work through a lot of those issues in a one-on-one setting where you can sort of address any like root concerns that any particular person would have. But again, this all kind of comes back to the notion that like you just got to put the time in, whether it's an offshore team or an onshore.
Yeah. No, that's good. Okay. So do you have any favorite tricks that you use to be successful in your role?
I have a couple, yeah. I think in my newest role, one of my favorite new things is checklists. So, whenever you start in a new role, I think whether you're an individual contributor or not, but especially as an individual contributor, you have about 3 to 6 months of kind of green field where you get to be a lot more effective than a lot of other people on the team, because you don't have the burden of having to maintain the thing you built last month. So I guess once you build enough things, you start to basically be the victim of your own success, and every single thing that could go wrong. So if you have 4 or 5 things you built, the chances of one of those failing in a given week, it just kind of keeps going up. Or there's some minor change that needs to be made to one of those things, and so your time kind of gets eaten away. And so one of my favorite tricks, I guess, or just the new practice I've been putting into place, is like every time you build something, figure out how you're gonna monitor it. How do you make sure it's good? Right? And that leads to ultimately a checklist for me where every morning I can just kind of start my day with, okay, like let's check this, and this. I can run, a handful of queries. I can check a couple of dashboards, and then I'm confident that at least as of, 8 a.m. This morning, everything was running, and maybe stuff will blow up midday, but like you're never going to have something that's failing for multiple days on it.
Right. I like that. Okay. So it's the idea is sort of like put some kind of intentional self-monitoring in place. And as a technical person now, to you, that's sort of looking at the things that you've built. Actually, that applies quite a bit to like leadership stuff too, because sometimes it's like, oh, I want to create a certain culture. I want to do a certain thing. So I'm going to put a new behavior in place. I'm going to change the time of my stand-up meetings, or I'm going to whatever. I think a lot of times those things just fall into like new habits, and you don't really take that moment to self-reflect and be like, okay, I made this change. Is that change, like, monitor that change? Is it doing the things that I want it to do for my life?
Yeah, absolutely. I think too, and then, so that's on the technical side. I think on the people side too, I mean, it is like you say, it's sort of, you could say the same thing, but I think what I like better is that if you have as someone who, even as a staff engineer, even though I'm not technically managing people, you end up starting to, if you want to call it mentor, or if you want to just call it, provide feedback or guidance, or just a sounding board to other engineers. As I've gone, I've just tried to prioritize that more and more and try and get myself to the point where I'm available for that as much as possible. Throughout a given day, the more you're sort of responding to random things that go wrong with your system, or even in deep work, which you need to develop new things, but the more you're sort of occupied with those things, the less responsive you are to your team members or your directs, if you're in management, to help them out on a problem, to give them some feedback, to answer a question, or whatever it may be.
Okay.
So I find the checklist approach, and I'm looking for other strategies to try and help me get to a point where I'm kind of freeing up my brain and my time as much as possible throughout the day, so that if I get a random Slack message from someone saying, hey, can you jump on and like pair with me on this? I'm available, we can talk, and then I can help them kind of get unblocked as quickly as possible.
Okay, so I have 2 questions, one for each of those. With that checklist, is that just a notepad on your computer? And what's like super concrete? What's one item on that checklist?
Technically speaking, yeah. I mean, I use Obsidian for note-taking, and so they've got like a template thing, so I literally have it templated, so every time I open up a new note, it's right there. What's on it? I mean, one item on it is check DAGs, so we use flow,
Yep, check
which has all these tags, and so that just means go through and click through every single one of my pipelines, make sure that there's no new errors that I don't know about.
Yeah.
There's a couple others on there. Check this or that system, which means go run a query, or go check a dashboard. Clear emails is one of them. So I like to just kind of like have an empty inbox at the beginning of the day. Get all my
keep
Slack
an empty
threads.
inbox.
I do.
An actual empty inbox.
I do.
Wow.
I'll have one in there for 2 or 3 days if I just can't get to something until after something else kind of thing. But yeah, I try to keep it as empty as possible.
My inbox would probably crush you. It's the worst.
I can't, man. It's just too much mental. I mean, maybe I need to do that practice of letting it go. But
well, I used to keep my inbox open on the side screen all the time, and lately I've been just closing the tab.
Yeah.
It's I'm not even going to look at it. I'm going to turn notifications off on my phone because it's too much noise.
Is it because does it stress you out?
It depends. So sometimes there's an email that I need to respond to, but I know it's going to take me 20 minutes to craft the message, and so that will stress me out if it's in there. But I also know that I don't want to spend the time to do that right now because there's something else pressing. So it's sort of depends, but yeah. Normally it doesn't stress me out. Normally it's 50 unread and 400,000 that are read but sitting there, and it
just is what it is.
I'm desensitized, I guess. Yeah. I love that, actually. I love the checklist thing. That takes you 10 minutes to run through in the morning?
It can take 10. It can take 4 hours, because if I run into an issue with one of those DAGs, for example, and I'm like, okay, this is where my day's starting, because generally these are the things that if it's on my checklist, if it doesn't check out, then that's my work item for the day.
Because like you said, those are things that you've built that are actively supporting the company. They're in production. And so if they're not working right, that is your highest priority for that moment.
Yeah,
to get it working right. Fix the stuff you've put out there.
Yeah.
Cool. And then you mentioned your second, I've already forgot it now, about the people. Being available for people for when those Slack messages come in. What does that look like for you? Do you block your calendar or something?
No, I mean...
Or how did you restructure what you were doing before to what you do now to be more available?
Yeah, it's more of a state of mind shift, that was probably the biggest learning from my last role, and from actually being, an official management position in the last role, is that in that role, it really hit home for me that I was way more valuable helping out and being available for the 3 or 4 engineers I managed to make sure that they were on block, make sure that they were going in the right direction, to cut them off from making a bad technical decision and wasting a day going down the wrong path, than I was to even just work on my own thing, right? And, sometimes you have to block out and focus on your own thing and kind of tell them, I'm going to get to you tomorrow. But for the most part, that's how you kind of multiply yourself, is by putting that time in. And so if you look at it as an investment that's going to compound, you give them 1 hour of your time, and now your system as a whole has someone else with 1 hour of extra training, and that means they're going to be able to go, for 1 hour, let's call it 2 days of extra work that they're going to be able to accomplish. And that may take you 4 hours to accomplish the same thing, because, you've been around for longer, the system a little better, but you can go use that 4 hours for something else now.
Yeah.
And next time they do it, it's going to go from 2 days to 1 day, and then they're going to eventually be able to do it in 4 hours.
Okay, so I think also part of what you're saying is not, because I think so there's a difference between you being the bottleneck for decision making, and that being just a bunch of onesie-twosie, everybody's asking you questions and you're just Roman emperor, thumbs up, thumbs down all the time, to if they have a question, you're going to specifically jump on a call or whatever it looks like to take the time to work them through not just the answer to that question, but how to think about the system at large so that they can go answer their own question.
It's both. I mean, sometimes you just need to answer a question.
Sure.
There's nothing wrong with that.
Do you get the people, though, that get lazy about that and they just want your time all the time because they want you to do the thinking for them?
I had an engineer in my last team who was kind of, wanted me to tell them what to code and what to do.
What'd you do about it?
It was hard. I ended up spending a lot more of my time with them, and just opened up the conversation directly with them, especially when it came time to, at my last company, we had the performance review cycle and that sort of thing. And so I took advantage of that to give them the feedback of, hey, I see you're at this level. They were doing good work. They were a competent, completely capable engineer. But, when it comes time to work on your next task, rather than sort of sit back, ask me what's next, or if you get blocked, ask me how you're going to solve this, I would like to see you think about could be next. How might I solve this? Come up with an idea, make a couple steps in that direction, and let me know how it goes, and I'll let you know. So it's more of just kind of trying to coach them into taking a more active role in the development process in general.
Did that work?
It worked okay. With that one, it got me some movement, some traction, but ultimately I think it was, some people are at certain places in their career or their lives, and they can be pushed a little bit, but they can only be moved so much.
Yeah. It's good though. It's a good approach. So now you've worked at, again, large companies and small companies. Do you have any advice on when is the right time to scale your architecture? Recently, somebody wanted to build a little prototype, and out of the gate, they told me, I want Kubernetes. I want this big, complicated architecture from day one. What do you say to that? How do you know when it's time to truly scale your architecture and go for more complex tools?
This one I actually have a pretty set opinion on.
Okay. Preach it, brother.
I mean, my philosophy is generally you just push what you have until it breaks. And when it breaks, you build something else. Sometimes you know when it's going to break, and if you are able to have that insight, you should have that insight, and the bigger you get, the easier it will be to see that coming.
Are there any pro tips for getting that insight early?
Just back to monitoring again.
Monitoring.
Back where we started, yeah. You gotta have your metrics. If it's an API, you gotta know how many. You gotta kind of just like you need your 2 or 3 or 5 numbers for every system you have that are gonna tell you how it's performing. Yeah, if you've got an API, you need your latency, you need your success and failure rates, your P99, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
You'll be able to tell pretty quickly, pretty easily by looking at trends over time when and where you're going to hit that point.
Sort of back to your book, step 1 is awareness. In this case, step 1 is like have a monitoring plan.
Yeah.
It almost matters less what it is specifically as much as the fact that you have something that you're looking at.
Yeah.
That you're looking at maybe every day, or maybe it's automated or whatever.
Yeah.
So that you can sort of see when the line starts to go up, and then you let the system tell you, is kind of what I hear you saying. Push what you have to the limit.
You have to kind of like, it's almost like you have to like live and breathe the numbers. Like you have to like really enmesh yourself in the system. Like, and that just comes by looking at it every single day and looking at particular numbers that tell you the behavior and the structure of it every single day.
Yeah.
And I don't know, it's interesting because you started off by asking about and bringing up an example of kind of wanting to go in Kubernetes when you just need a prototype. Well, the other side, the flip side of this is when you are just building that prototype, I mean, don't waste your time with metrics necessarily right out of the gate. You're gonna, like, if you're literally just building a prototype for a demo, some people will want to, that's the same people probably who want to put it in Kubernetes will also want a full monitoring solution, dashboards, graphs, and the whole 9 yards, right? But when you're just starting out, maybe your monitoring is literally just going to the site and like clicking a bunch of things really fast and making sure that it doesn't fall down.
I love that. That's right. I think from the engineering perspective, we can over-focus on the numbers sometimes, which makes more sense as you scale. It makes more sense to be measuring in numbers. But in the early days, that measurement, exactly like you said, it's really kind of first principles, really. It's just, my user want to use this. And you know that because every day you wake up and you go through that workflow. You go through the workflow your user might do. You click the buttons, you see how long it takes to respond, and that's your little litmus test.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah, and at some point when you've reached the point, you have a load balancer, and so, your test is not going to be like emblematic of someone else who might be on the East Coast or something like that. Then, eventually you gotta, you're
more sophisticated monitoring.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, if all you did was spin up an EC2 instance and or you've got a Raspberry Pi even,
right?
And that's where you're serving from. I mean, yeah, you don't need to go overkill on the metrics.
Okay, I like that. Any other tips for knowing when to scale?
Yeah, I mean, technically and with people, I think you kind of push that breaking point. I mean, I would say
you break your engineers once they quit. That's how you know it's time.
I think we're doing it well in my current role. We're basically, we're hiring, I think, very smart, and give a lot of credit to leadership on this. Like, we're hiring fast, but we're hiring smart. We're not over hiring. We're definitely pushed to the limits, but it's sort of driven by, like, okay, if, everyone's working at full capacity, if you want more, then we bring in more engineers, right? So that's kind of like, that's the litmus test. We have this much work to do, and it's kind of on the business to decide, well, how quickly do you want to grow or scale?
Okay, so that sounds like, first of all, it sounds like there's good mutual respect between business and engineering.
Definitely, yeah.
And business is sort of, well, which way was that question going? Were you saying business is asking engineering, like, tell us when you need to scale and we'll help you make that happen? Or is it the other way where engineering is just like, hey, current capacity, you'll get there in 6 months, and if you want to get there faster,
it's a little bit of both. It's a little bit of both. I'd say it's probably more engineering driven. Like,
okay.
Like this is, hey, when is this going to be ready? Oh, probably 2 weeks. Okay, well, how about this? Well, that is number 3 behind this, so probably 4 weeks.
Okay.
How about this? Well, that's not even on our roadmap because we don't even have someone to take that on. Okay, so how do we get it faster? Well, either reprioritize or bring in someone else, and we'll see how we'll have another conversation about it.
Yeah, okay, good. So tell me a little more about Symbiosis. Like, tell me a little bit more about what unique problem the company is solving.
So a couple of things. We're solving the symbiosis comes from the symbiotic nature of retailers and brands advertising. Our current target is on social platforms.
Okay.
And there are plenty of shared goals between those two entities, retailers and brands may be represented by advertisers, or a collection of brands may be represented by an advertiser. But there is currently no real way for those two entities to collaborate on an external site when it comes to advertising.
Interesting.
So that's the specific problem that Symbiosis helps to solve, is to allow a retailer to allow their advertisers, or their, the people who sell products through them, to collaboratively advertise externally to drive traffic to the retailer site, which is going to benefit the advertiser or the brand. It's also going to benefit the retailer, and the customer may or may not buy something from the advertiser that advertised. They might buy something else from the retailer. So there's kind of this benefit that the retailer gets either way, and then there's a benefit that the advertiser gets in some cases, and helping to tease out kind of the amount and the relative position of those two benefits is something that Symbiosis is trying to do with just improved metrics and visibility and observability into the performance of campaigns.
I was familiar with that whole world, so I mean, is this as simply as serving ads on like Google ads that the brand is paying for, but it's driving traffic to the retailer website?
Correct, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, for example, you might have like a sporting goods store, bigbucksportinggoods.com.
Yeah.
And then you'll have, some advertiser, Nike, that wants to drive traffic to buy shoes, and they've noticed, good performance on bigbucksportinggoodsstore.com. So they want to drive traffic there. They want to put ads on Meta that drives traffic there. That results in more sales for them.
Interesting. So, because I'm thinking, why wouldn't Nike just drive traffic to their own site to purchase off of their site?
Right. Because, that goes back to, I guess, the core problem that retailers solve in the marketplace, right? Brands or, OEMs are not exactly, their core competency, their core business is not distribution and marketing. It is actually marketing in a lot of cases, yes.
Distribution.
But distribution, supply chain management, logistics, retail, that's not really where they want to focus their time in a lot of cases. You have some companies, like if you've gotten the Instagram ads, there's a lot of these that kind of pop up on Instagram, like, I don't know, Vessi comes to mind, or Suave shoes, or there's this toothbrush company that's, they do the direct-to-consumer route. You either can't buy off of a retailer, a third-party retailer website, or they're just not really, they bias it towards direct-to-consumer. Dollar Shave Club was sort of like one of the, they were trying to upset the model of buying razors from, Costco or QFC or whatever it might be.
Yep.
And just go directly direct to consumer, and now you go into any one of those stores and you see Dollar Shave Club razors.
Right.
So I'm sure they may or may not actually, I don't know, still do the direct to consumer route, but there's a reason that retailers exist in the.
I'm a club member. It gets shipped to my house, and I don't have to go to the store for it. So.
Perfect.
But they're probably making a lot more margin do the retailer route at this point.
I would imagine the margin is actually better in the. I mean, now I'm hypothesizing. This isn't my area of expertise, right? But I would imagine that the margin is probably better for direct to consumer.
Oh, okay.
But the volume is better. Like, that's what you can't really achieve, I think, with direct.
Right.
You can push a lot more volume if you let someone else handle distribution.
Okay.
And, you know, sort of like the last leg of getting it to the consumer.
Yeah.
Rather than having to kind of do that whole logistics business yourself.
Yeah. Okay. And what is unique about, so that's the unique problem Symbiosis is solving. What's unique about the company from your perspective?
I think the coolest thing, the unique thing about the company to me, I mean, just the people. It sounds cheesy, but it's true. You know, I mean, we've got an awesome leadership team and they're awesome in the way that, like, they are extremely technically competent, and yet they trust the people that they bring on. Mm-hmm. So I think technical competence can sometimes be a double-edged sword in leadership or management, because they maybe think that they know better than their own engineers that they hire. Or, you know, they have a ton of opinions about how things should be done, and they, you know, need a lot of explanation for anyone to do anything differently. Not this team, though. They're extremely competent, and yet they have complete trust in the team that they hire to make all the right decisions, and they're there to provide feedback. They're there to provide any expertise that they might be able to, act as a sounding board, give direction and guidance. But for the most part, when it comes to implementation, kind of keep their hands.
Yeah, okay. It's true. It's hard to find.
It is.
It's hard to step into that role and get your fingers out of the pie making process, you know?
Yeah, I know. Yeah. I would have a hard time. I do have a hard time every time I try to pass something off. I would have done it that way, yeah. And sometimes you were right, and sometimes you learn something. So
that's the most rewarding part, is when it goes wrong sometimes, but it feels like when it goes wrong, you know, there's like a little hit, maybe there's like a little downside, but when it goes right, there's this much bigger upside. Yeah. Even just in the pride you feel of, like, I wouldn't have done it that way, but that person did a way better job. Yeah. Like, they thought about it in a way that I wouldn't have thought about. They killed it. That was great to watch. Yeah. I'm so grateful I gave them that opportunity to shine, you know?
Then, you know, that's the leadership side. Then also, I mean, and this is kind of also the leadership's credit, I guess, but just the team that we've managed to put together is it's a senior team, for one thing. It's all great people. Somehow we seem to have avoided hiring any massive egos. I think that's actually, like, it seems simple, but it's a hard thing to avoid. And from what I've seen, there aren't any of those, or the ones that there are, they sort of jokingly have one.
Okay.
You know? And everyone that I've encountered and worked with has been just completely humble to the point of, you know, yeah, here's my code. I didn't quite do that part the way that I would have liked. Like, this might be a little weird. I had to hack this and that together, and it's kind of like not working great, but, you know, like, here's the skeletons, you know, here's where they're buried. You know, rather than the sort of like, what do you mean there's something off in my code? What do you mean you would have done it differently, you know? Yeah. And I've just encountered none of that, and I think that and the leadership culture, I mean, the whole thing it creates this, and it feeds in on itself and kind of continues to create this virtuous cycle.
Are there any, again, pro tips that you can share with, during that hiring process? I'm especially thinking of a non-technical founder looking to find technical people, maybe a technical co-founder, or maybe just people to bring on. Like, do you have any pro tips for looking for that ego? Because you're right, there's a lot of engineers out there that think they know everything and love to talk bad about all the other kinfolk. Yeah. You have any wisdom on that?
I mean, I don't think that there's any universally applicable things, you know? I mean, to me, it comes down to trust. That's probably too vague to really be applicable in and of itself. You know, I think the dynamic between a non-technical kind of person and a technical person is going to be different, you know, between any two given people. But for me, you know, in both directions, whether I'm hiring someone who's going to be supporting me in a technical capacity, or whether I'm talking to someone who is going to be managing or like providing feedback from the business or non-technical side, it's sort of the degree to which you guys can disagree. I think that's maybe the one concrete thing I can offer, is that, and as you're working through, maybe if you're doing a technical problem in the interview, or as you're discussing maybe a scenario or, playing or a case study or something like that, if you run into a spot where you could have two different opinions, the degree to which you can sort of both articulate those and yet still kind of maintain a civil conversation and see the other's perspective, I think that says a lot about how you're gonna interact with that person versus, no, this is how you should do it. What do you mean there's another way? Generally kind of, to me, indicates some sort of a ego that's gonna be hard to unpack once they actually get into the team.
I was actually thinking about this the other day. I was wondering if it would be a faux pas to approach an interview with the mindset of, I'm gonna actively search for something we disagree on, and then I'm gonna lean into it because I want to know that. I want to know how even if it's something that I'm not passionate about, I'm going to get passionate about it in that interview just because I want to know like what they would do. And I'm not going to be a jerk to them, right? I'm not like looking to beat them up or whatever.
Yeah.
But just be very respectful and yet opinionated just to see how they handle that kind of conflict.
That sounds like a good strategy to me. Yeah.
I'll try it sometime.
Yeah.
I'm gonna try it to you.
Actually, one of the questions I would ask, generally I guess technical, non-technical, doesn't really matter, because I ask it from both directions. So that's one of my favorite questions, is to ask them. It's one of those, tell me about a time when, and it's tell me about a time when you disagreed with said person. So if it's an engineer, tell me about a time when you disagreed with your product manager, or project manager, or something about a deadline or feature or an implementation or something. And as if I'm interviewing a product manager, for instance, tell me when you disagree with the engineer, why, how did it go, how did they handle it, and kind of if they can articulate something where, they can talk about, firmly stating their position and their reasons and their technical reason behind it, but then how they're able to work through it and either kind of coalesce and bring a bunch of people into seeing kind of what their perspective was, or acquiesce and sort of understand the other side and move forward, like that. That kind of speaks volumes, I think.
That's a good point. I think a lot of those behavioral questions are probably, the big companies are like required to have these processes, so they make sure to ask those questions. But for the smaller companies, those are obvious questions you should be asking that I feel like sometimes you might not think to go there, but.
Yeah, I mean, and everyone's got their own, 4 or 5 questions they like to answer or ask, and that's fine too.
That actually reminds me of one of the interviews I was in along the way. I might have read this online, actually. I don't know if anybody ever asked me this. Maybe I found it as an engineering manager when I was looking for juicy questions to ask interviewees. But the question was, tell me about a opinion you have. Tell me about a position you have that, how did they phrase it? Basically, most people don't have that position. Tell me about something you believe that most people disagree with you on. I think it was something like that. I really liked that question because I think, I think you can tell a lot about a person where they go, and then it's easy to lean into it too, right?
Yeah.
It's like, well, why? And, I mean, again, you got to be careful because you're not like, things are so political nowadays. You got to be careful with the responses sometimes.
I don't know. For me, that question, I when I think about it, it's like I just don't spend a lot of my time thinking about the things that I disagree with other people on. So it's a hard question for me to answer. It's not like a running list I have. Someone once asked me in an interview, what's your third biggest pet peeve?
Biggest pet peeve? Like, how much time do I have to think about this?
Yeah, exactly. Yes, I don't have a running list of pet peeves, and it would take me a while to kind of stack rank them. I'm not quite sure. I'm sure there's a reason or a methodology behind those kinds of questions, but I'm not quite sure what it is.
Yeah, it's funny actually. So what came to my mind when I was asked that question, or when I found that question, I was pretty immediately, my answer was unit testing. Most engineers I know are big believers in unit testing. I think it's a waste of time. Most of the time, it's a waste of time, is what I believe. And I'm in a minority in that. And it's not like, I don't say it's my way or the highway, but it is like if somebody was to ask me, what should our engineering standards be? It would involve sort of minimizing unit tests, like wherever necessary, and spending that time in other places. But random aside.
I mean, I agree with that. So I'm feeling like more and more. I think it is. I mean, we could go down a whole rabbit hole there.
Oh, yeah. Well, but I think it goes back to what you said about have a performance measure. And when you're in the early days, it's usually not something like unit tests. It's usually not something like some kind of heavy engineering thing. It's usually like click through your application, see if your user would want to use it. And that's going to get you
your unit test.
A long way. That's your unit test. Well, dude, thanks so much.
Yeah.
I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
It's good. It's good stuff. Look forward to. I look forward. I know. Well, here's a good ending question.
Yeah.
We're in February of 2025. What kind of big goal have you set? Either maybe this year, maybe next year, that we should follow up after you achieve that goal.
Well, this is more personal life, but
Love it.
I'm downsizing my life. I'm going to try and get kind of more free financially and time-wise, just to kind of open myself up to new opportunities. So
You gonna go do the van life thing?
and not quite the van life
Okay.
thing, but maybe somewhat close, somewhat in that direction, but not quite all the way to the end of the spectrum.
All right. So after you downsize, you get that taken care of. We'll follow up.
Yeah.
See how you're doing.
Yeah, exactly. Good.
Sweet. Thanks, man.
Yeah.